Hey everyone, this is Cynthia Caloyne. I wasn't sure if Chris was going to say anything or not, but I want to welcome you all. And by the way, if it's time for you to speak, Chris, just let me know. Um, Boy, what a great book club this has been. I was watching the videos of your sessions. I watched session 3. That's Chris, by the way. That's not me on screen. Hi, Chris. There you go. I'll let you get a word in, and then I'll start my opening. Go right ahead.
Oh, sure, no, not a problem. As Cynthia said, my name is Chris Lukes. Probably you guys are tired of hearing my voice. I'm here with the Metagame Book Club, as is Kay. So she'll wave at the camera as well. And we're going to go ahead and first thing we're going to do is just thank everybody for coming for our ending keynote. And I want to thank Cynthia for being able to make it with us, as well as thank the Games and Sims Network, as well as Inevitable Betrayal Guild for making this book club memorable. And also, I definitely got to do a big shout out to Christina Tiones, who has been our Foasis extraordinaire. So thank you for taking us on that journey. So Leah, Cynthia, I don't know if you've been following us, how much you've been able to follow us, but the Foasis piece was really fun this time around. We added some different games and puzzles and riddles, and we can't take full credit for it, but Christina was able to go ahead and get permission from Matthew Winner, who developed it for the Level Up Book Club whenever they did Ready Player One. A little bit ago. So we were able to recycle and reuse, and it's added a different dimension. I think we're going to try to carry on to future book clubs as well. So lots of fun there. And without further ado, I will now turn it over to Cynthia to talk about games and 3D simulations, dystopian fears to utopian visions.
Hey, thanks, Chris and Kay and Christina and Grid on the Padlet. What you see, and I'm waiting to see it on screen, so I see Chris still. Do I need to click to shift it, or there we go? I'm waiting. Because I don't want to start advancing slides.
No, that's okay.
There we go. Okay.
There you go.
All right, what you see here, some of you may find this familiar. A bunch of us educators got together in, I think it was 2014, and made a music video for the Virtual World's Best Practices in Education. And being me, I have to put my camera in strange places and look at unusual perspectives. So I'm using this as my background image for the talk. My name is Cynthia Caloyne, but most people know me as Lear Lobo on the metaverse, right? And so let's see, here we go. Our opportunity today isn't just about games, virtual worlds, virtual reality, or this notion of dystopian to utopia, but this notion of our values, the things that matter, and why we're so interested in games and simulations. This image captures it for me, this intimate connection, this sense of presence, being inside and deeply connected with what we're doing. So I want you to keep this in mind. Now, I tried to make a version of this in the virtual world. That's me wearing the chapter from one of my first books, right? And so, which is a little hokey, I know. But by the way, creating a skin out of that and your eyes and everything else is not trivial, let me tell you. But and then my book, you dive into it, you get content. The reason I'm showing you this is to explain that there's an intersection between all of these topics and an opportunity for us to be creators and makers and not to have arcane skills or knowledge in order to do it. So I want you to keep that in mind. Now, who am I? Well, 19 years ago, my doctoral research was testing immersive equipment in virtual reality. So I had a head-mounted display device from General Reality. I had the Nintendo Power Glove. I had a Pahemus tracker with receivers for the joints in my body, and I was really interested in the immersive experience, right? And how to get VR on a PC for everyone to use without training, help, or manuals. What an ambitious undertaking, right? And I was able to design an experiment that supported people in their behavior. I had to run some pilot studies and study all those deleterious side effects, which are how people feel and how they might get nauseous or motion sick when wearing wearables like the head-mounted display. In 2010, we won the grand prize in the Federal Virtual World Challenge, and I'm not bragging here. The money went to research. It didn't go to us, right? The reason we won, though, is because we were using pop culture kinds of technologies like the holodeck. This notion that content reses when you need it and disappears when you don't. And in our holodeck, you didn't have to request it. You didn't have to say, load program or whatever. It would do it based on the nearness of your body. This is set in the virtual world, and it was designed by the team Andy Stricker, Mike McCrocklin, and myself. And then Jean Holm from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. She's the chief knowledge architect. She gave us spacesuits for our learning center and helped us present it at several simulation and modeling conferences for games. So that just gives a little context on my background. Long ago, before I got my doctorate, I was an applications programmer and a systems programmer for Air Force Space Command. So if you ever saw the movie War Games, I helped to support the Situation Room software, which is what you see. Mine was a mirror image of it, not in the same location, but and of course we didn't have a Whopper, Chris. But
no Whopper.
No Whopper. But when we won the grand prize, the only reason that's really memorable to me is I got to meet Will Wright, who designed The Sims, SimCity, and Spore. So you may be familiar with those games. And so when we're thinking about games and simulations, I think of Will Wright. Okay. And of course, afterwards, I got his signature. It's the only autograph I've ever gotten in life, right? And and that's my dog whining in the background. My apologies. And he decided to gather us all together and to design a TV show, a participatory community design TV show with virtual world enthusiasts, game designers, and people from all walks of life. And he created a StoryMaker tool that would grab Google Images and allow you to create a storyboard out of 16 to 22 images for an episode, for a 30-minute episode. And then you'd run a pitch for it. Yeah, it was really cool. This was in 2010 through 2011, and the show aired for an entire season on current TV in 2011. It was a Comcast Top Picks there for a while in February of 2011. And my name is in the credits for the first episode. I used a handle, one of my gamer handles. I used Mixen, M-Y-X-E-N, because I wasn't sure, because the opening scene, they're in bed and you see her back and the tattoo, and I thought, oh, where are we going with the story, So I didn't use my name in it. I used an alias, and we were part of the Black Ops team, which was very cool. So he gave us roles, he gave us responsibility. They used some of my lines in the episode. It was really quite thrilling. But Bar Karma is like the Men in Black meets the Twilight Zone, the most mysterious bar in the universe where you go when your karma catches up with you. The reason I tell you about this is I want you to think of games as crossing over into media and television and life and reality and everything else. I don't want you to think of them as disconnected from reality, from work. I want you to think of the game of life, and you're living it right now. Now, I saw Christina's Habitica last week in the talk, and the things she's been doing to track her life, and she had reached level 63, etc. And while quite a few of us don't have those kinds of measurements and metrics in our lives, we recognize when we're winning the game of life, right? And so he's been working on something like that, and then other related games that he's been testing that leverage social media. I do give you a couple of links, and let me put these links, I guess, in the chat. Well, it's not going to let me grab them yet, but later on I will. We have an entire video of him giving an incredible talk with like 194 slides in 45 minutes that walk through the theory space, how to design games, and how to have them be measurably significant, which I think addresses some of the questions in the last discussion. So I wanted to share that with you. It's just an amazing set. And here's a little scene from Bar Karma, and you may recognize some of the actors from other HBO television specials. So we had a premiere cast. It was really a wonderfully constructed show. Now, why use games and simulations? Why should we be developing them, and why are we interested in having them in education, right? Well, Constance Steinkuhler put it very succinctly, and so did Miller. And if you've been following any futuring and innovation instruments, you'll notice that out of 25 countries, the U.S. is always between 22 and 24th. We may even hit 25th. I haven't been keeping up every year, but imagine that 80% of us are unable to tip when we go out to eat. Nowadays, you can see at the bottom of a receipt, they let you know what 15% is and 20% is, and it's not because they think you're cheap. They think we don't know how to, calculate it ourselves. So
I was going to say that's straight out of, that is straight out of like a sitcom. When they learn that their father can't do math in his head, so he doesn't know how to tip. I mean, that's such a good.
Well, it kind of reminds us of WALL-E. If you ever saw that animated show, Wall, and then the letter E, the fact that everyone's atrophied so much that their bodies are no longer, they're suspended on little hovercraft, and they're totally dependent on their technology. And of course, what we're thinking is we want to keep the mind rich, and we want to stimulate lifelong learning. And these are some of the benefits of gaming, whether it's entertainment gaming, serious games, critical thinking games, whatever. And then many of you know that I teach doctoral classes. I've been teaching for 19 years, but mostly in the last, let's say, 10 years at the doctoral level. And pedagogy is really important to me. And by the way, for those of you in education who always wonder, how do you say that word? There's a cute little site. Yeah, there's a cute little site called How Just Say, and I'll type it in the text chat. I'm trying to get my cursor over there.
Okay.
I'm running howjustsay.com. But it could be .org, but it's phonetically how just say, the letter J, and it'll pronounce any word for you, and there's quite a few technical words there. So if you're ever wondering when you're giving a talk, how to say something, that's a great place. I'm going for socio-technical too, because I'm really fascinated with the intersection of people, technology, and that technology supports their behavior, is very natural and organic, and people do not have to change their behavior to use it. So I'm thinking of games, so like when you go to a game controller, if you're not used to doing video games, it can feel very uncomfortable. It's kind of like using the mouse the first time. Oh my gosh. So I'm instead thinking about the future as incorporating technology that's natural to us. I'm going to show you real quick. I'm not putting these images into my talk because they belong to other people, right? And plagiarism is not my friend. So yeah, my life of crime. Yeah. Yeah, and I love some of these images. They're wild. I've used some of this stuff. In fact, this one here, the Virtue Sphere, and I will enlarge it because I know it gets really small on these screens, right? I've been inside one of these about 2 or 3 years ago at Maxwell Air Force Base. My research team that won the Mars expedition with me invited me out. They put a monster headset on me, and you have to realize the early headsets, not the one I used, but the really early ones, weighed 26 pounds and used to have to be suspended by an arm, or it'd snap your neck. Nowadays they're a lot more lightweight. The one I was wearing there was pretty huge. It had a lot hanging out the front, and it was really high fidelity for training the troops, for Air University and the Squadron Officer School and all those kinds of programs. The problem is when you're in that Virtue Sphere, that ball keeps moving, it has inertia, and as you try to stop, the ball keeps moving, and of course what happens to your feet if the ball's still moving and you have stopped moving? So it's not trivial to work in those kinds of spaces, especially when we take your eyes away, okay? So I want you to think about that, because wearables come at a cost, of our personal bodies and how we think about our interaction. Now, for those of you who are looking for opportunities, I'm going to paste this link in for you. And this is the HoloLens. There's an invitation right now for academics to identify opportunities to use the HoloLens in research. And Microsoft will award $100,000 and 2 HoloLens development kits to academic institutions that apply. So if you can think of a good use, and I'm going to try to stimulate some ideas today, here's an opportunity for you, okay? So yeah, so we're not just going to talk talk theoretically about the future, and I have written some chapters and done some work in various books, but I didn't include that in today's talk because I don't think that's what makes it interesting to us. So let me return back to my talk, and I'll go back to the slideshow mode, and here we go. So here's a list for you in case you're trying to sell it to your institution, to your families, to whoever is helping you, supporting you in your vision of being a creator, a maker. And I know you're thinking, oh, but I'm not a game designer. Oh, but I'm not a programmer. Oh, but I'm not a, all these things we're not. And what I want to tell you is we are visionaries, we are pioneers, we are people who can come up. My dog's the one whimpering, by the way. Yeah. We had a rough visit at the vet, so she's sitting next to me. And my apologies to you guys because I don't want you to feel distracted. Well, let's look at a little more research and then think of some ideas for ourselves. This is again from Constance Steinkuller's work. It's after her dissertation because in her dissertation, well, her dissertation's kind of like, I think six chapters from different papers or books, but in her dissertation research, she researched lineage, and she was looking at the value of playing games and things she could measure for literacy. Well, here in an after study, she looked at World of Warcraft, and since many of us play, I thought, and I know you're probably familiar with it, but I wanted to highlight a few things you might not be familiar with. I also give you a link to her talk that she did in a virtual world. It was like a mirror image of Second Life. It was one of those enterprise versions at Case Western. And she gave a talk for the Digital Media and Learning a conference in 2010. And this is her content from it. I got permission to present this to our doctoral symposium last month. She analyzed 2,000 posts and 85 threads. And she was this is the power of the study, in case people are saying, oh, people are researching all these things, but there's no power behind it. There's no substance. Well, there's an amazing amount of substance in these slides and in her inquiry. First, she's looking at scientific discursive practices, how people are constructing knowledge, right? How they build on each other's ideas. And then she does some model-based reasoning to pull it in with some mathematical modeling. She has undergraduate degrees in 3 subjects, one of them being mathematics, right? And then she gets to the qualitative to look at the tacit epistemology, how people evaluate and how they contribute in these forum posts. And this is me, by the way, and I love World of Warcraft, and thanks to Shandili and Eleonora, yes, we all got the insane title together. And of course, this means I just spend a lot of time over a 5-month period playing. These days, I don't get to play as often as I'd like because I'm so busy creating and writing and helping others create, but it's still one of my loves. So is the talk productive in these forums? Well, 6% was uncodable, but 86% of it was related to social knowledge construction, and then of course there was some banter. So people would ask a question, others would offer explanations, and then they would bridge with external references, with calculations, with mathematical formulas. They would build on each other's ideas, they'd use evidence, etc. So it was very, very easy to measure and to see the value of these conversations. And she also did, I'm not going to show you the entire study. This is a teaser to have you go look, right? But
thank you.
And I'll give you the links. But
no, thank you for the link. I don't think we'd mind the whole study, but thank you for the link.
The thing is, she shows literacy, and then she measures it with all these different tests that you use for the pedagogy, for understanding the value of our reading material. And she looks at the gamer reading material as opposed to the educational texts, the ones that are used normally in the curriculum, and she does comparisons that show how students progressed over time, and compares these two kinds of literature. So I do recommend you look at it. Now you may be thinking, well, who's Constance Steinkuller?
Oh, well, no.
Okay,
I don't think
okay, good. Everyone here knows? Yeah, okay.
Well, we're going to if we don't make that assumption, we could mention, what she was, science consultant for the White House, the first one ever on games.
That's right, science, technology, engineering, and math for their policy in the executive office. That's right. for video games and education. So looking at literacy issues. So this is from Jesse Schell at Carnegie Mellon. So if you're really looking to build your powerhouse, your rationale for why should I do this? How can I bring this into my curriculum? How can I think about it? You know, these are many of the qualities. And by the way, all of them are true for games. So that's. I asked the question of my students. I'm teaching games, gamification, and serious games right now at the doctoral level, and I have them designing 3 games. How's that for ambitious in a single course, right?
Beautiful.
But you only get better if you practice, right? And I don't know if I didn't include the image, but Will Wright gave a little, in his keynote, he talked about the story of the art teacher who divided her class into 2 halves, and you may already know it. One half, she said, I want you to create 1 pot, and the quality of the pot is what will earn you an A, right? And so it has to be an absolutely wonderful pot, but you only have to turn in 1 of them the entire term. On the other half, she said, I want you to create 50 pots, and they can be of any level of quality, but you must have 50 pots to qualify for an A, right? So at the end of the term, which half do you think got the A? There's only
50.
one half got A. That's right.
50.
That's right. The ones who practiced got the A, and the ones who only did 1 pot did not. And I didn't feature the image from it, but they are in his slides. I asked him to browbeat it. I asked him to post his slides on SlideShare.
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting is he didn't create an account first, so they're anonymous, right? They're by Orlando 2015, but I do have them linked in here later in the. And so here, I noticed you guys were thinking about mobile and thinking about games. So I gave you a little trivia quiz because there's nothing more deadly than just listening, right? So let's think about this. Gartner Research, which of course are the folks who do the hype cycle and look at technology, and any discussion of the future should include them. By 2015, which of course is now, right? What percentage of organizations that manage innovation processes will gamify them? Will it be 60%, 80%, or 50%? What do you think?
I'm going to take 50%.
Okay.
And you have the Padlet. Chris has the Padlet up, so people can go ahead and type, and we'll see if we can get some people to type. And while they're doing that, Cloud already made a comment. Our students are getting that socio-technical thing down. When we have 5-year-olds coming to school already adept at mobile devices.
That's right. That's right.
And let's see, we should be getting some results pretty soon. I do have to, in our instructional design center, I had one of our instructors come in today. His 4-year-old was with him, and he's like, oh, I have some questions, but, can I bring her in here, right? And so she sat down, and he's like, that's a desktop. And she's like, oh,
that's cute.
And this is a mouse.
Right, right.
And it was and
that's awesome.
She flies on the iPad that they give her that she plays on. Okay, so we're getting images now.
By the way, these images are from the Inspire Space Park in Second Life, in case you're wondering. Cool. So I don't see the answers, but I'm not looking at Padlet.
Oh, okay, then I'll let you know.
Because I have a lot of slides. And the answer was indeed 50%. You were correct.
Okay, so we've had a couple different guesses. 80%, 60, 80.
By the way, there's a learning retention theory that was, it actually comes from a study, I think in '68. I found it in a nursing, in a health-related presentation, and I've been using it for a long time. If I do all the talking today without anyone guessing, and especially guessing the wrong answer, much less the right one, you'll remember 5% of what I say tomorrow, which is a really dismal thought. You're probably thinking, why does she bother talking, But if you answer, and even if you get it wrong, and especially if you get it wrong, because your wrongness causes an emotional response, right? You feel something about it, and you remember better. Yeah. So we have to have opportunities to wallow in our wrongness, right?
Everything about the Foasis that Cam had us playing was all about wallowing in our wrongness.
That's right. Failure-based learning is what games are about, right?
Yeah,
Because
failure
we have to
education.
fail, we have to the challenge and the struggle. If everything's easy, if you've ever looked at the flow model, in the flow model, in order to get into the space of flow, and I know you're big on Fiero and flow, Kay, but
Yeah.
you know, many people feel anxiety in a doctoral program because, oh my
Mhm.
gosh, all of this theory is being pushed at me, and then I'm in all my classes, I do not give exams. I give cognitive apprenticeship activities. In other
Mm.
words, I'm working alongside my students, so I'm not just observing them as they're working, but I'm working too. So we're using the journeyman apprentice kind of approach to building mastery, to doing application and synthesis. So my goal is to develop skills, even if it's theory craft and leadership and applied, so that I know that they remember well. And so
Mhm.
to get beyond the 5%, if you discuss and participate, you'll remember 50% 24 hours later. And if I get you to do an activity like making the 50 pots, you'll remember 75% 24 hours later. So our goal at our level of education is to get to these long-range benefits, right?
Mhm.
We're not interested in short-term memory. We're not interested in testing. And I used to be really interested in essays and theoretical kinds of cases. Now I want to put people in the case and have them have the experience, which is what I call a simulation. Okay, for our next question, by 2014, what percentage of the current gamified applications will fail to meet their business objectives due to poor design? Will it be 50%, 80%, or 75%? As you can see, all three numbers are high. Who would want to go into business and adopt game-based thinking only to fail if they knew 50% or more of them were going to fail, right? Well, I don't see any answers, but we'll go ahead and go forward. The answer is 80%. So imagine what kind of risks. How would you ever be able to sell this in the workplace? And I know you're probably thinking, well, I'm not from the corporate life. That's also true for education. When we try to adopt a lot of these strategies in education, most of us do not feel comfortable if we know that 80% of us will fail. You know, that's not a good indicator. You
Mhm.
know, we may be okay about it with WoW and a new raid where we haven't built our strategy and tactics. Not so hot for our professional life, right? On the third note, let's look at mobile app success, because many of you said, well, mobile apps are probably the future of games, right? We're going to have all these mobile games, and everyone's going to be playing from age 2 and up, you know, on these mobile devices. Uh, how many of them are a financial success, perceived that by their developers? And by financial success, I'm thinking you can pay your mortgage and eat, you know, you put food on the table. We're not talking about being a billionaire, no. So will it be, you see the options here, 1/100th of a percent, 1%, or 1/10 of a percent? Any thoughts there?
Oh, okay. People are starting to type.
And you'll notice these numbers are also small. If we knew that 1% or less were going to be able to make a living at doing it, how many of us would be doing it, right? Because most of us, I mean, there's a lot of hobbyists among the education
Yeah.
community, right? But we also like to eat. We're not full here. you, you have to sustain life. And so it's not just about meaningful play and benefit to humanity. You have to sustain yourself and your family. It begins there.
We're getting some 1% coming over.
Ah, you guys are optimists, I'll tell you right now.
Oh, wait a second. Chris might want to get on mic and explain some of what's going on there.
And I'm not going to torch you anymore about the mobile stuff. This is the last mobile question. But the reason we're looking at this is if we think the future of gaming is in mobile, right? And we notice that people are not making a living at it, and we notice that innovators are not being successful in applying game-based strategies to systems that aren't game-based normally, not entertainment-oriented. Boy, what kind of future are we looking at here, right? Okay, you have a vote for each. Great.
Yeah, and
So
the other.
the
Oh, okay.
answer was very small. It's 1/100%. And by the way, these were all predictions by Gardner Research, and they're based on trends, their analysis, and of course, they put a lot of energy. They even one of their researchers put out a book and has all kinds of recommendations. I agree with some parts of the book, other parts I don't, and it's because I'm a gamer and a rebel, okay? So I want you to recognize that. You always have to know yourself. I'm also a pioneer, which means I'm willing to fail. I'm willing to try things that may or may not succeed in order to discover the opportunities. Well, let's look at, this comes from Jane McGonigal, who came and spoke for our doctoral symposium last April, and it was so great. I got to spend some time with her. We had a private discussion afterwards with a handful of folks and talking about her research and her goals. What's the name of this VR world that helps burn victims manage their pain and reduce their morphine doses? This is a serious game where they wear a head-mounted display device, like the kinds of things we're thinking about for the future, and they play. They throw snowballs. It's a very cold environment. You see snowmen and penguins, etc. Very fanciful. And you know, one of the problems with morphine doses for third-degree burns, is the fact that they cannot manage 100% of their pain. And the morphine is very bad for and of course they cannot increase the dose beyond the maximum. Any guesses there? Is it Snowball Toss, Snowman City, or Snow World?
Oh, we got a Snow World.
I got a Snow World so far.
That's because you guys know Jane McGonigal. She spoke at ISTE, and of course she presented some of this there as well as at our symposium. But what I loved about this is the fact that serious games and simulations that use immersive devices and wearables, they filter out the world around you. They put you in the experience, and it's so immersive that the patients started to feel cold. They felt chilled by it. You get goosebumps as you're doing this. And their minds tricked their bodies into thinking that they were really, really cold. And because of this, they were able to manage their pain, reduce their medication doses, and of course have better outcomes. So now we're seeing the power of games that bridge with virtual worlds, and of course many of you are familiar with this one. McGonigal talked about the fact that she played Fold It, so did I, but we didn't join in time. All the people who played at this time, when I gave it away, didn't I? It is Fold It. But the notion here is when you crowdsource a game, and you break it apart, and you have gamers use their strategies and tactics to address a problem. And in this case, it was the HIV protease. And scientists had studied it for 10 years unsuccessfully. But in 2 weeks, gamers were able to break it down and solve it. One of my theories about this, and you can agree or disagree, is the fact that gamers aren't scientists necessarily. I mean, they could be, but they don't have to be, and they do not apply. They don't know their boundaries, right? We tend to test things. Yeah. When I beta test, I beta tested about a dozen, maybe 13 MMORPGs. When I do it, I try to get multiple copies. I try to break things, not to be malicious, but to really see what are the boundaries, and can I get into spaces I'm not allowed in? Can I do things? Yeah. The scientific approach to what's possible here. I did that for The Sims Online for Will Wright. I had several accounts, and what I did was I wound up amassing so many resources, I was able to build a castle. And so when they launched the game, they limited it, so you could only do what I did if you had 6 friends, right? 6 of you total, 5 friends and yourself. Well, most of us aren't that social. I mean, we aren't, because when it comes to building on a single bit of property, it's really hard to agree on what you're going to do. But that was an interesting tactic. And yes, the name of this is Fold It. And everyone who played the game during that period became part of the people listed as solving, that the HIV protease. So games can have benefits that help humanity. Here's one, Remission and Remission 2. What disease are the players fighting? This one's really easy, isn't it? But what I love about this is the notion of it's considered one of the largest studies out there and it centers on games. Had over 370 participants, and of course had some amazing results. Well, I don't know how you guys are answering, but of course remissions related to cancer, and you're seeing images from two different series of games. On the right, you're seeing remission with the nanobot, the original game, and on the left, you're seeing 6 other games that you can also download and play. These are free. You can grab them at any time. You've probably seen this, but you become a nanobot, you go inside the human body, and you're fighting cancer with your meds and with various other resources. The reason this study was so powerful is kids have to take a longer regimen of cancer meds, maybe 2 years or more. And of course, it makes them terribly sick. And I don't know if you've ever tried to get your children to take medicine when it makes them terribly ill, but it's an uphill battle. And so their rate of survival increases if they take these meds, right? And they noticed a 20% response based on this. So we're seeing games that are very serious. We're seeing them that are playful, and yet their benefits extend far beyond education and, of course, some of our goals. This is just a fun question. The New York Public Library, right? The one with the lions out front. It was featured in many movies. It's like in 20 movies or more. I've listed 8 of them here. Which one is it not featured in? And of course, this is a trick question. You just take a guess. This is supposed to be just for fun. Was it A Night at the Museum, The Adjustment Bureau, Ghostbusters, Oblivion, Breakfast at Tiffany's, Head Over Heels, The Time Machine, or Arthur? I made it easy. If you guys know me.
Well, there's one that the font's different.
Oh, is that what you're thinking?
Yeah. That might not be the clue. You might be tricking us.
Well, which one do you think it is?
Oh, it's not that one. I'm not sure. I almost want to say Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Well, that's a good choice.
But not the right one.
You know what makes it easy? It's
What?
the first choice. The Night at the Museum takes place entirely at the museum, right? And so I know that was not fair of me. But the reason I use that is I give this talk also to the American Library Association.
Okay.
They have published a list of it, so I'm always interested in whether they know their own stuff, right? And I'm using this as a bridging, and of course the Adjustment Bureau, that's where the Adjustment Bureau was featured. Anyway, but this is one of Jane McGonigal's games. On my birthday in 2011, she launched it, and at the request of the New York Public Library, because they noticed a decline in interest in going to the library and savoring all of this knowledge, right? And so she designed several different games at first, and had a few failures. Had a few no, not that, kind of moments. And then she latched onto this concept. Let's do an overnight with everyone locked in the library and have 500 players in one night write 100 stories, one story for each of 100 objects or artifacts that are not well known, right? So it's a discovery kind of thing, and it was an alternate reality game. And here's an image featuring some of the people who participated. 5,000 people offered to play, and they were so shocked by the overwhelming interest in it. And of course, they could only feature 500. And then she developed this bookmark on the right here that shows some of the icons that were used in the app. They stayed all night, they wrote their stories, but they could not have them published in the book unless they got 57 signatures, the same as the Declaration of Independence.
Oh, wow.
So they'd stand on a table and they'd read it out, and one guy would go around with a really long, one of those really long horns like you see, Ricola,
Yeah.
and would wake people up and then announce that someone was going to read their contribution to the book. Well, in the morning, they printed the book, they bound it, they had a hand-binding sewing process, and the New York Public Library was going to put it, just in the public collections, the open stuff, and they realized this was such a poignant effort, all this energy. They put it in the rare book room next to the Gutenberg Bible and a handwritten copy of the Declaration of Independence. And all 500 of them and their families have permanent access to the rare book room because they're co-authors of a rare book. So the notion that gamers can come together and do these very powerful thought experiments, and that's kind of what I think of that as. It's an augmented reality game, but it's an alternate reality game as well. But it's also this notion of everyone coming together. And of course, in one of her talks on SlideShare, she gave these little symbols and these labels for things. I adapted them and created something called the Game of Research to show how we use emerging media and all these kinds of features like protovation, this notion of fearless, rapid innovation, and open authorship, things that we're sharing our ideas and pioneering. And so what are we talking about for future of game designs? This is the next set of slides are game designs my students have made. And in this particular class, I wasn't teaching it. Andy Stricker was, but I attended all the classes because as a mentor and a participant. And that's what I mean by cognitive apprenticeship, is this notion that we work alongside our students. They're creating, we're creating, and they get better at what they do because of the journeyman and apprentice kind of experience. So it's kind of flipped classroom in the sense that we're not lecturing, we're doing the homework, right? So together. And you'll notice these images, these textures are from the LCARS database. So all of this stuff is available, and you can get the rights to use it. That's the really cool thing about this. And of course, they use a lot of devices in here. We have chatbots. The long, skinny sickbay nurse standing next to me is of course a chatbot, right? And of course the patient as well, the chief engineer. I gave a talk about wicked problems, and I think this is what fascinates me about the future of games is, wouldn't it be nice if we designed games that were both fun to play and yet helped us to tackle some of these problems, not just through awareness, but also through chiseling away at some of the issues related to them. So I want you to keep that in mind. So if we're thinking about all the different kinds of games, and I mentioned alternate reality, and the reason I mentioned augmented reality is I know you brought that up last week, Kay, when you were talking about taking your handheld devices, getting out into the field, and actually experiencing life. Well, I don't always want to experience life. I have to admit, when we did the Mars expedition, I have no desire to go to Mars, okay? I am such a comfort puppy, okay? But I am fascinated with the opportunity of exploring the technologies needed to make it possible to go there. And of course, we were doing proofs of concept. Should we do a proof of concept on a lunar colony with Mars in mind, or should we look at other alternatives? And that whole game was centered on where should Congress spend their money. And when you were playing the game, you were a science officer on board, going through 4 workstations, looking at videos and interacting with content to make decisions, to build your strategy, if you will. And so it was challenge-based thinking. And what fascinates me about this, and this slide here, I'm bridging with the High Fidelity project for the future. If you're not familiar with High Fidelity, and I've been a part of the project for about 1.5 years now, but I'm kind of like a silent partner. I do a little bit of development, I do a little bit of exploration, and I go, wow. What their plan is, wouldn't it be nice if we had virtual worlds and games on handheld devices that we would crowdsource, do a peer-to-peer processing arrangement for all the 3D graphics, the collision detection, the physics, everything else, right? So your handheld device didn't have to weigh a ton or overheat or drain its power immediately to be able to process all this. And I don't just mean for playing and for visiting, I mean for creating also. So to have those kinds of resources on this little device, they're planning to parcel out very small bits of the processing around the world, and to compensate people for their off-cycle use, right? Similar to the SETI at home, method. Yeah. What's that, Kay?
Oh yeah, yes. I grew up on SETI.
Me too. Me too. I always had like 2 machines devoted to SETI at home back
And
in the
I guess we should mention what SETI SETI is.
the search for extraterrestrial life. Yeah. But yeah, many of us are fascinated with this connectivity between space and STEM, games, and of course virtual research. So many of us think of this as all connected. This again is from the Virtual World's Best Practices in Education, and we're making a machinima, video to advertise it here, and more images, more stuff going on, and lots of perspective. But all of this content's created by people like you and me, and that's something to be aware of when we're thinking about, boy, how hard is this? Well, taking a moment and stepping back, in our research, we don't just make pretty pictures and fun little simulations and jump in them and say, gee golly whiz, wasn't that great? We put a lot of thought.
You need to go give the kids the finger paints and have them paint and go, but you're Rembrandt.
Well, in our classes, we started out by thinking about 3D design thinking, and we're bridging with Tim Brown's research on his Harvard Press, Harvard Business Review book, right, Design Thinking, and we take it to another level of abstraction. We're really thinking about getting inside your content and being one with the content, what it does to you for those kinds of deep immersion experiences. So we're not just thinking you put on a headset or you wear all this stuff that may or may not work well with your body, but we're thinking about what happens to your mind and what transforms you and gives you these deep benefits. Okay, so this is part. We wrote a chapter for a book that's coming out later this year about cognitive remapping and reframing. Think of it as if you've ever been resistant to working in teams, for like class projects or work projects, you're like, oh my gosh, they're going to let me down, their quality's not going to be good, some people will disappear, or they'll contribute stuff that's just so awful, right? If you've ever had those thoughts, right, and those fears, we have ways of trying to break that down and to help teams form norm and then get to consensus thinking, or where they realize they can leverage all this diversity and find new pathways. And we call that cognitive reframing and remapping. Here's something for everyone who's out there researching and trying to figure out what's in it for me. That's all fine and good, but where am I going? And some of you may be researchers, maybe working on your master's capstone or your doctoral dissertation, and this is a slide. I think this is a wonderful study by Richard Millwood. Have you ever seen The Hotel? It's called The Holistic Approach to Technology Enhanced Learning. And imagine for a moment, in the very center, you have the disciplines these people come from in this like tan color. And I know it's really microscopic, but there's all kinds of fun fields. The rosy color, the red color, are the giants in the field. So if you were building your literature review or trying to look at the background, the theory craft on why am I doing what I'm doing in my game design, right? And then you're looking at all their theories in blue and green, and then in white, these are little synopses of them all. And it kind of shows the intersection of how we all interconnect, which is what fascinates me. I'm not on there completely because I don't see my cognitive apprenticeship method, but I'm certainly part of constructionism and social constructivism and connectivism. I'm part of those things. We do use a lot of Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. We certainly use scaffolding. That's your learning management systems and how students build, a variety of projects that build to a final, that are all interrelated. And of course, in the lower left are things like communities of practice and situated learning. But anyway, there's something for everyone on this, and I do have a link to this. But if you're searching for it yourself, it's called Hotel, and it's Technology Enhanced Learning by Richard Millwood. He has an entire study that goes with it. And so so I take those things and I go, wow, when Leonard Nimoy died, I did a little tribute to him, and I created this holodeck in a virtual world, and then I showed my students how to use holodeck-like technology to do their own content on simulation resers, right? And I created the little holodeck doors. I know they're cheesy, but they go whoosh and they open, okay? And that's my portal. And what I was trying to say is, and I did all this in like an hour or so it did not take a long time. It took, the longest part was using PowerPoint to create the grid, okay, the texture for it, because I'm a little lazy and I wanted all my lines to line up, right? That was the hardest part. And of course, I'm wearing a red shirt because let's face it, most of us feel this is a very risky business, right?
Mhm.
And our opportunity to get shot down and fail is pretty high. So you got to have a little sense of humor about what you're doing and be willing, be fearless motivation, as Jay McGonigal would put it. So I don't know how I'm doing on time, but let me go a little faster. These are slides from some of my students. This is Barbara Truman turning into the Phoenix while she's giving her class presentation within her game world called Pandora's Box. And I just love the fact that she opens the box, the things start coming out, and then she goes from a lady dressed in green Grecian dress to a bird of fire, right?
Mhm.
and so it's this notion that virtual reality and virtual worlds not only are easy for us to construct content, but also, and there she is featured in her green dress on the left, but it's this notion that we're creators, we're makers, and then we can do pretty amazing things. We're no longer thinking just death by PowerPoint. We're really
Mhm.
thinking about everyone's part of an experience. And one guy won those wings over on the left, the golden ones, and we're standing in the labyrinth, and you see the four-person team on the wall, photos of who created this, the students who did. She was not a designer developer when she did this. It was her second class in a virtual world. And of course, so it had a high cognitive load, right?
Mhm.
And of course, what's lovely about this is I bridged this thought with something from the Institute for the Future, from Jay McGonigal's work, where they were thinking about games as vehicles for examining wicked problems. So, and I think of one of our wicked problems being what we face in education. This notion of 80% of us being scientifically illiterate or not being able to, to use math to, how do we address these problems? And I know many of you are on the forefront looking at these issues, trying to figure out what to do. Kay's been really busy with the maker movement, and I've been doing a little on the virtual side. I created a hackerspace for the Open Simulator Community Conference, and of course everyone looked at me like, well, what's this, And I'm like, imagine if you're using artificial intelligence and you're weaving all these things in, and you're creating these highly personal experiences. You have NPCs like World of Warcraft on yours talk to people in full sentences and even hold off-topic conversations, and and you can
Well,
track their conversation logs. Yeah, go ahead.
and what I was going to say, because a lot about with the book club, we were looking at, are these things possible? When will they be possible? And like in like the first 10 pages of the book, the main character is talking about how he went into a virtual environment, the virtual reality oasis, and he didn't get to just watch Sesame Street. He
Right.
got to be the kid
That's
at
right.
Sesame Street. Think
That's
about the
right.
difference in learning with that.
Oh, it's very much so. Here, one of the students incorporated badges, but it kind of felt like an afterthought because, let's face it, most of us wanted the wings, right?
Yeah.
But on the line you were mentioning, Andy and I did a institutional review board application, and we did a research effort where we said, and this was for the Mars geothermal that we ran in OpenSim in our virtual harmony world, and we said, what would happen if half of our volunteers, our learners, were not human? If they were code fragments from the matrix or water molecules, would they remember better? Would they learn better? If they had a connection with their content, they shared an identity with the subject they're studying. And that was it was a somatic computing study where we were wondering if identity matters when it comes to learning. Because most of us feel that math is a foreign language, right?
Oh,
Especially when it comes to calculus, differential equations, etc. We don't think of them as our everyday fun moment, right? Go ahead, Kay.
oh, I was gonna say, but think about it. Think about it if we were in a place where it's like, instead we're running around with architecture in a virtual world that is based on Fibonacci. Or
Right.
if we
Yeah.
or if we constantly saw it like that kind of immersion, I absolutely, I think that would be fascinating for you to study, and I'd read the report.
That's right. That movie, and I'm drawing a blank, Dan Brown's movie, which of course was followed up with Angels and Demons, The Da Vinci Code, the Fibonacci number. In the
Mhm.
beginning, they think it's a major clue, and then later they find out that that was just her trigger for getting his interest. And so I found that wonderful because it does lead them through the museum. But so that's this, and by the way, I have that as a game, which I haven't finished playing. It's one of those rainy day moments when I'll get back to it. But last time I noticed you were talking about pedagogy, and I didn't include the slide, but I'm often talking about andragogy and hudagogy. So I think of pedagogy, and just so you guys know, from my perspective, it's wonderful. It's curriculum, right? But it's also it tends to be heavy on the memorization of basic facts and rules. So it's the background, it's the structure, it's all the things that help us to remember that arcane knowledge that we need, to progress. Whereas andragogy, to me, is how people learn, how adults learn in particular, which is through trial and error, right? Through activity-based learning. I always poll my students, and for many years, for master's classes as well as doctoral, I'd ask them, how many of you, the first day of class, and this is when I taught face-to-face, have read the book, have read the first chapter that was required for today. And there's always 1 out of 30, right, who's read the book. The other 5 have read a few paragraphs or pages and then skim the rest. They flip the pages like hieroglyphics as animation, right? And then there's some percentage who have scanned very, very quickly, like the 5 minutes before the class began. And then, of course, there's 3 to 5 of them that haven't even bought the book yet because they're really trying to see if I'm going to use it, if it's going to be relevant, and do they really want to expend the money. So when I think of pedagogy, and I think of andragogy, I'm really thinking about people. I'm not just thinking about the content and its structure. I'm thinking about the people and how they digest it, apply and synthesize it. So andragogy is how people learn. So if they're not going to read, then of course we have to have another way of inserting them into the subject, the experience, and giving them a reason to discover. Now these students created these slides, and I'm looking at it. This is, and they put them behind their game design. I don't show the whole game, but it's a spaceship game. So they had learning goals, they had their game elements, and then they had their pedagogical elements. So they're mapping these between them. And of course, this is part of their synthesis. Now I'm a quirky individual. I put my camera in the floor. So I've made the floor disappear between engineering in the bottom and the bridge up top, so I can kind of see how game elements are moving between them. And of course, some of this navigation, and there's all these little spheres, some of them for teleportation, but others are rezzing around our bodies as we move through the game and interact with it. So this notion of awareness. So I tend to not like to think, I don't like to be constrained. Like most gamers, I like to figure out a way, like the Kobayashi Maru, right? The no-win scenario in Star Trek. We want to get to success, whatever that means. So in my mind, and we've been using AI for, 30 years or more in games of some sort. I remember the old games like Dark Reign and Submarine Titans, and of course the Westwood games, Command and Conquer. Some of you are going Red Alert, their tribute to In the Pipe, 5x5, from Aliens. All this movie and entertainment and pop culture weaving together into our games, and using AI when we do strategy games where you say, in Dark Reign you could tell your troops, your flying troops, your ground troops, etc. You could give them decision criteria. When you're 50% damaged, go heal yourself. Go back to camp, get repaired, and come back, kind of thing. And go on patrol and do these kinds of actions when you encounter these kinds of folks. So you can have a little more control, a little more. And by the way, you're running 200 to 1,000 things. So that's a little different than WoW, I know. But I'm the kind of person who wants to control the world. And some of you are going, yeah, that's all fine and good. What's going on in the research today? Well, last year, Barbara Truman and I went on the game design cruise, and I recommend this. Every few years, they run a cruise, and they do the entire conference on it. And they'll do the global game jam, and they'll do all these all these workshops here, and I'm giving you links to all the papers, and I'm going to show you very quickly some of these effective computing games. So games take on many different dimensions. You know what this reminds me of? We have that emote tool, the emote HUD in Second Life, that was done by Yadni, and there are other versions too. And we played a mafia game using it, where we were trying to detect who the culprit was, the bad guy, and then of course who's lying and who's telling the truth. And you could only answer by gesture, by how your face changes. Fun. It is fun. And so I have some videos and links to the paper for that. That's called Be Faced. If you've never seen Big Huggin', boy, this one had 2,000 players. For those of you who do research, it's hard to get 2,000 people to come hug your teddy bear, okay?
Oh, yeah.
This teddy bear has 12 buttons, and as you hug it, that's the interface object for playing the game, okay? And then this one here, you'll probably never play unless Apple changes their mind. It uses the iPhone, and you kiss it, right? And the problem is, when they reviewed it, they says, well, we're afraid people will damage their iPhones by kissing on them. And I was thinking to myself, you don't know how people hold it with their neck and talk into it.
Oh, yeah.
Because their lips are all over the thing, but I didn't say anything. But anyway, Lindsay Grace has done a couple of these games. She did the Big Huggin', and so there's a lot of doctoral research, graduate research, and then, of course, game designers. All the game design companies come, too, so it's a wonderful mix of academics, educators. So we get the scholarly research folks, we get the teachers. There's a lot of things for teachers, and then you're meeting Electronic Arts and Microsoft and all the other game shops to talk to them about their issues and what they're looking for. So it's a wonderful opportunity. So, and here's another one, Harmony. Card games are big, even at the Digital Games Conference, because they're a way of bridging and also doing a proof of concept for the research in it. So what's the future bring? I know we need to wrap up. So, by the way, well, this is a big topic, and I know I didn't really talk about dystopia. I did love the list of books that you featured from Ernest Cline's site. I looked at that, and I visited his site and love how he's wandered through all his topics and what he's been doing. You know, I love The Stand, Stephen King's book, and quite a few of the works that were on there are transformational. What got me started was everything from the movie Wild Palms to VR5, that old TV show. And so when I started in the field, I went from working with Air Force Space Command on something that looked like it was out of war games, right? And I said, wow, I'm working on 1960s architecture mainframes, which is not the future, okay? And so I wanted to do something radically different. And the way I was able to convince my committee that I could do this was positioning all of my papers and thought and research for an entire year of classes around VR and where it was going and why this is transformational. VR gives us the power to create and to transform. Some of the issues I see with the future is like the new version of Second Life, High Fidelity's world. And by the way, that's at highfidelity.io if you want to check it out. They have over 32 worlds open, and everyone can bridge in and add their stuff. The problem with those is they're being developed in Maya, and High Fidelity is using JavaScript for the programming. Well, that's wonderful if you've studied those things, but what does that mean for educators, right? Because we're so used to these easy-to-construct tools, you know, easy-to-use tools that rapidly help us to mock up stuff. Holographics, around our body, the notion of the hologram. We've been calling our stuff holograms for over 10, 12 years now in virtual worlds, because when we construct a simulation, it's full of holograms. So all of this 3D content we've been producing will be suitable in some regard or another at some level of fidelity for this brave new future. And of course I'm thinking of the HoloLens and other resources here. Now I did a chapter for a book. It was for postcards from the metaverse, which became the immersive internet. It changed titles on me when Palgrave Macmillan published it. But anyway, I had a table that did quite a few future projections. I really can't go into all of that right now, but here's a call to action for everyone listening, okay? The 3D books and games, I want to see stories that come to life. I want the things we value to be incorporated in our games and in everything we do. And I want to see 3D books. I want to see this bridging of virtual reality, of video, and of course of game-based strategies where students are experiencing the story and living and breathing it. We did a proof of concept of this with Peggy Sheehy at the Ramapo Project for the Teen Grid for Second Life. And many of you know that the students read Of Mice and Men, and then we asked them the question, when the story ends, is George guilty of murder? And all 400 students said, no, he's not guilty. He meant well. He loved his friend. He saved him from torture murder by killing him. And so we put them through a courtroom, and we had them, you know, do all the roles that you see in a courtroom, including the jury and the court reporter. And at the end of 4 days and their deliberations, they all convicted. And we said, well, what changed your mind? And he says, due process does not say he meant well. It says, did he kill him beyond a reasonable doubt? And of course he did, you know, but we're going to recommend a lighter sentence because he meant well. So seeing these kinds of transformations in a very short time frame is part of the power of what we're doing. Putting people through experiences where they do this critical thinking for themselves and they reach conclusions that are relevant and timely for them. You know, that's what matters. So what do I see for the future? I don't know how many of you are using GitHub, but GitHub isn't just a place for organizing your code. It's really a project management space for aggregating effort, right? For pulling together a team and all their artifacts and statusing and building something that could be quite complex, yet you're doing these individual pieces of it. And I think we should see more of that kind of thing, where we're not having to do the heroic efforts of one individual, right? But and then I want to see these content repositories. We've seen grassroots efforts where people host quite a bit of content that you can grab and use in OpenSim or Second Life, but we need to see more of it. I want to see very organized. I want to see something like the Maricopa Learning Exchange or Merlot, something way beyond the learning objects and all that early stuff. I want to see the evolution of it into these game artifacts and all these pieces that people can use. I want to see metadata. I want to see the creator, the actual people who did it, and their tailoring instructions so that our cognitive load is low when we reuse this stuff. And of course, why? It's because with 1/7 of the world playing, and playing this many minutes, and 94% of females and 99% males playing, and of course people calling in sick, you know, 25% of the people who play a game call in sick the first day, this tells you the games matter to people, and we want to channel all this energy. Now, I'm not going to go through all the statistics, but you're welcome to do so. But look, 44% of people in high school are not engaged. So we see this decline, and these are problems we want to address, you know, and of course through positive emotions. Her list only included 10. I added some from my research, in case you're wondering. So I bridge with everyone because I believe we're all connected. And of course, there's all these negative emotions. My critics are always saying, oh, games are so bad, and competition's even worse, and then violence. I have a game, a hostage rescue game, where we shoot our students, and it was very cathartic, I want to tell you. We're in a room, and they're trying to save a United Nations relief worker who's been shot in the leg. And of course, as they go through the gameplay, they're under crisis. We give them a gun and tell them, don't use it, right? That's one of the rules. How's that for mean? And of course, only one person gets the clues. So whoever comes across a clue, an objective first, gets it, and then we're interested in whether they share and how they share. And then we're interested in whether leaders emerge. So we had one doctoral student who did a leadership study. And so we run these games as simulations, and we call them game simulation kits, because we can create one environment and many people can play many different kinds of games within it. And we can study these things. And by the way, here's the links I promised you. and more of them, including...
Yeah, if you don't mind, we'll put it up.
You bet. You bet. I don't mind at all. And now, let me see what time it is. The only problem with sharing, yeah, I'm 11 minutes over, but I meant well. So I hope this has been a very quick, rapid tour of the future and some of these wonderful wearables. And I own some of this stuff. That's the really embarrassing part of the story. I have the Leap Motion and some of the other devices. And I'm fascinated with where we're going. But I do want to tell you, I don't think people like wearing equipment. I think the day needs to come where we model people in their bodies and their gestures without them having to wear something. I think that's when we'll see rapid growth, rapid innovation, and widespread use. Thanks, everyone. Over to you, Kay.
Oh, Cynthia Lear, thank you so much. This gives us a very different idea that wasn't really the ending of the book, and I was wondering if we should do some fan fiction kind of thing after this, going, okay, so Wade won the prize and Artemis is there and so is H. What do they do to make the world better?
It's interesting. At the end of the book, he goes to see Artemis out in the sunshine, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're in the maze, and he realizes he wants to spend time with her. And of course, this is, he's never really had these kinds of opportunities before. His perception of self, it's not just whether he has money or not, but his perception of self was not as a winner in real life. And so he goes out into the sunshine, and he says he doesn't even think about the game. I like the fact that he didn't turn the game off, because I think of the game as the communication mechanism and infrastructure for global, a global society. So while there's downsides of the game, a lot of people are saying, oh, these people are not living life, they're not outside gardening, etc. I'm allergic to everything that grows, you know what I'm saying? I go outside and I'm sniveling the whole time. So as a fellow sufferer, I like opportunities that allow accessibility and give a fair playing field for folks who can't necessarily run or dance or fly or whatever the real life activity is. So I like the fact that he didn't turn it off on that dystopian note. I do like the fact that it was very empowering for everyone to play. Of course, it brought out the dark side in quite a few folks, right? Sorrento among them. But I also see that he could not have won without the support of his friends. So we see all kinds of positive messages.
Oh yeah. It really did, especially with James Halliday making the last key. Interesting that he made the last one where you needed to have at least 3 people.
That's right. That's right. And I have to admit, in WoW, I'm going through and doing the older content, and I was doing the Firelands. I said, one of these achievements is really hard to do by myself.
Yeah.
And I am the type to log in 3 different accounts and try to do it, with myself, which of course may not sound fair, but me, myself, and I are available at 3 in the morning. See?
Yeah, and unless you're trying to get into an Aussie guild, you're not going to see that many.
No, that's true. That's true. But I do believe in playing well with others and diversity, all these diverse solutions. Even folks who have absolutely no background in what you're doing, they can offer perspectives that are so valuable. They'll ask the questions that most people will say, well, that's too silly. I would never ask that, because everyone should know the answer. And of course, that constrains us. That's just like the HIV protease. Anytime we accept those boundaries, we're not thinking way outside the box. Well, did you want me to stop sharing at this time and bring up some other? Okay, I'll stop my screen share. Let's see how I stop.
That's fine, and we're
okay. There you go.
With Chris, we're seeing people are just thanking you so much for this talk.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. I will, these slides are huge, so I may have to Dropbox them to you or something.
Okay, we would love them.
Even as JPEGs, I'm still at 18 megabytes, okay?
and the thing of it is, of course, and we're designing an ARG for ISTE in Denver this coming year. So we were wondering if you could be involved with us.
Oh, you bet. I would love it.
Great.
Yep.
I know. So we want to say thank you, and I don't know, Chris, if you want to say anything before we take off and close up. And we are not that much over. We're only 15 minutes, and that's nothing for us.
Oh, good.
I just want to say thank you for the wonderful hour plus. And it's befitting because this is a book club plus. So,
Yes.
so it's definitely very well done. So, and I echo everyone's comments on the Padlet, and awesome job. We all really enjoyed, your presentation as well as all the thought-provoking and also the quizzes. People
Yes.
liked being able to interact that way. So, thank you very much.
You're
So
welcome.
we're going to
And
say, and so this is us closing up Ready Player One. And don't worry, we'll be back. We said November, but who knows, maybe even sooner than that. So bye, everybody, and see you online.
bye, all.
Bye.